What's up, everybody? It's been a little while since I've done a solo episode, so I'm excited to be back in this format. I find it to be one of the ones I have the most fun with. Today, we're going to talk about timing. It's not something we talk about a lot on this podcast because we're often in like a little bit of the strategy or the theory on how to make affiliate channels work. And today, I just want to get into the practicalities of how long it actually takes to get into a big platform like a Credit Karma, an Experian, a NerdWallet, a Red Ventures, something like that. Platforms that have real upside and real scale. Look, the headline is if you're planning to be in one of those channels, whether it be Karma or Experian or another large platform, and it's on your roadmap for 2027, you need to start now. I'm recording this June 18th. So a full 6 months before we turn the page on the year. But that's just kind of the reality. These things take 6 to 12 months. I've seen them even go longer. I've seen them go 18 months. There's probably deals that have taken even longer than that. So I want to walk you through why that is so that you can start to set expectations internally on how long these things take, but also so that you have realistic expectations. So when you put together your operating plan for next year, you're not putting something up there on a Gantt chart that's gonna miss by 400%. Let's say if you put a 3-month timeline to getting into one of these channels, like that could miss by 400% if you're not careful. Meaning like that could take 15 or 18 months instead of 3. So I'll walk you through just my personal experience here. Hopefully you find it helpful. Let's break down what goes on here. Part one is the internal prep. A lot of times lenders skip this step, and I think that's dangerous. But what is the prep? I mean, the prep here is do you have a competitive product for your segment and for the marketplace you're going to play in? And then do you have a competitive marketing funnel? So is your application, let's just make this practical, is your application rate 40% plus? That's a nice little threshold to think about. Does it have to be 40%? Of course not. It could be 35, it could be 32 even. That'd be on the lower end. I'd start to get pretty worried under 35, but at 40, I feel fine. At 35, I feel okay. Under 35, I start wondering how much you're set up to succeed within these really competitive marketplace platforms. So you have the application rate consideration, and if you're under that threshold, then you really got to dig into your application forms. I did a podcast with Rachel Olson recently, so go check it out. You'll find it somewhere in the feed. And we just ran through an example of, it was like a teardown of, hey, how could this application flow for a personal loan product be better? And that gives you a real flavor for what that work entails, what it looks like. So you got the application flow stuff. And then for credit card companies, you have your approval rate. So you need to be clearing 70, 80% out of these marketplaces. And that's going to be based on just good targeting. That's aligned. Your back-end model is aligned to the front-end model. And that diligence entails looking at your back-end model carefully, seeing what data you have. For example, you use TU. What attributes do you use with TU? Does Karma, does Experian have those exact attributes? Do you use any custom attributes? How important are those custom attributes? Do you use any non-bureau data that Karma or Experian may not have? So there's all these considerations, but the bottom line is if the platform isn't able to replicate your model at the marketing stage, that's going to hurt your approval rate. That's going to drop your approval rate. And all that really matters to gain impression share in these platforms is how good your approval rate is relative to everyone else. And the guys, the companies that are in there doing really well right now, they're cranking along at 70, 80%. Gross approval rate on a compliance basis, it's higher. It's probably 90 plus. But you need to be right there along with them. And if you're in the 60s, that's going to be tough because you won't even qualify for some of the better badges that these platforms offer. So that'll hurt your click-through rate, it'll hurt your approval rate. So that needs to be dialed in. That's a whole diligence exercise, I think a lot of companies skip before approaching the platforms. I would not skip that. I would get ahead of it. And then for personal loan companies, you need to think about your funding. How dialed in is your funding rate? So after you've approved someone, how often do they sign the contract and fund the loan, and all the things required to actually closing out the deal? So again, there's benchmarks out there on what competitive looks like. I bet the platforms will tell you what a competitive funding rate would be on their specific platform for the specific audience you're going after. So it varies by platform and audience. But you run down the benchmark, and then you make sure that you're in line. Because at the end of the day, you need to make sure your efficiency from the time the impression is served to the time that you convert the customer is competitive with everyone else out there. So that's more or less the prep you'll do internally. You'll often need to prep for the CPA. So are you able to pay the market rate for your category? You'll have to prepare for the volume they'll be able to send you. If you're talking to a platform like Karma, for example, and you're not prepared to take lots to take lots of volume, and at least you're not able to articulate your path to being able to accept the kinds of volume that they'll be excited about, then you might have a challenge. So anyways, those are some internal prep considerations, and that could run you a couple months, depending on how much homework you have. Next, you got to get the partner's attention. So, man, this quite literally is like getting them on the phone, a Zoom call, whatever, Teams, Meets, whatever you use. But you need a video call with them where you can start to walk through your intentions that you'd like to partner with them. Here's what you bring to the table. So you're bringing some kind of pitch there. And quite honestly, even getting that call, that could take a month, that could take 2 months. These folks are busy. They don't have tons of people sitting around on BD teams just ready to take a call from a new potential partner. The exception might be if you're on like a short list of partners they'd like to onboard. I actually got a call from someone at a platform recently saying they specifically want to onboard so-and-so lender, and I'm guessing they'd bend over backwards and do whatever they had to do to make time for a phone call with that specific lender. But if you're not on that short list of what they want to onboard, then you're fighting for their attention, and that's hard to do. So that's going to take some time. And then once you have their attention, and that could be, you're probably not going to get their full attention even on the first call. It's going to take developing that relationship a little bit. Then you have to get them on board. You have to get them to agree that what you're bringing to the table is of value to them and their customers and their users. And the thing to keep in mind as a lender is they already work with dozens, if not hundreds of lenders. And the proposition of adding you, most likely outcome is that it just swaps out, like the revenue just redistributes, right? So instead of going out to the 10 lenders in your segment, it goes out to 11 lenders in the segment. Their top line revenue doesn't change, but they pulled some revenue away from their 10 existing partners that went to you. You're paying that share now, but it's very unlikely that the bounties you're paying them out of the gate are incremental to them. They'd like it to be incremental, and over time, if their models work well and your product is great, it could be incremental, but even in that scenario, it's not all of the revenue you pay them. So let's say you pay them $500,000 a month, maybe only 10 or 20 or 30K of that 500K might be incremental revenue that they wouldn't have otherwise sourced through their other partners. So you just got to keep in mind like the value math, the business case for them versus for you, very different. For you, it's going to look almost 100% incremental to your business. Any accounts you source, for them, it's a different story. So Expect those conversations to take longer than you think, and the reason why is just the economic incentives are quite different. So you got to get them on board. So we talked about internal prep, getting their attention, getting them on board. So category 4 now, tactical deal related stuff, and signing NDAs, signing contracts. Those sound simple enough, but what's going to happen in practice is now your chief security officer is looking at things, your chief risk officer is looking at things. Different constituents from across the company will start to look at the deal terms and ask questions, and there's going to be back and forth with the partner. And look, the reality here is these deal structures tend to be very cookie cutter and standardized, and most lenders just kind of go with the base agreements. But lenders new to the category sometimes think they have more negotiating leverage than they actually do. They're probably better off just signing the deal terms and moving on. But instead, they're going to go and redline and go back and forth. And this could take months and months with potentially ultimately no real net change to the deal. But expect some friction there from your cross-functional partners, mostly because they may not know what's standard and normal in the industry. And if you ask anyone for input on a senior committee, they're going to give you input, and that input's usually going to turn into questions and back and forth with the partner, and that just drags things along. And unfortunately, for no great benefit to either party a lot of the time. So bake that in. It's going to take some time. And then category 5, then you need to the partner, once everything's done, your affiliate partner has to actually do the thing. So remember, this is out of your hands, that you can't list the product for them. They have to do the work. There's usually an engineering queue or a product queue or an onboarding queue or whatever. That could be months too. So when you add all this stuff up, that's how you get to 6 to 12 months. And it could go longer if you get stuck in, for example, getting the partner on board with the pitch. They're not buying it and they say, hey, this sounds okay, but I'll onboard you. You can do blah, blah, blah. If you can serve this audience, or if you can change your APR from this to that, or if you can add a sign-on bonus to your credit card that looks like this. They may just have things they want to see before they give the green light, and then that's going to turn into internal conversations. All that stuff takes time. So we've just walked through what it takes to produce a single lead from a platform. This gets you to just the point where you're on and you see maybe one lead. This doesn't address at all, which is where I spend the bulk of the podcast talking, is how do you actually win once you're in the marketplace? How do you rise to the top of the leaderboards? How do you become a leader in market share? I'm not going to go into that today. There's plenty of other episodes. You can look towards the earlier ones, actually, where I talk about this stuff. So today, I just wanted to calibrate you on that 6 to 12 months. That's the reality of what I've seen in the marketplace. If you're in this early phase, if you're trying to get the partner's attention, trying to get them on board with working with you, there's an event I'm hosting in San Francisco on September 23rd, where I'll have a lot of the major publishers there. I will post the link. You can go to events.thefreetoaster.com, where you can learn more about what we're doing there. But we're curating 150 senior leaders from the industry to come together, to talk shop, to do business together. And we're going to be putting together some content as well on the state of the industry. And we'll have some discussions / friendly debates on certain hot questions that I think lenders and publishers are facing. So if that sounds interesting to you, that'll be September 23rd in San Francisco at the Exploratorium. And then day 2, we'll be hosting only 50 for a day in Sonoma. Day 2 is just totally networking time. So we'll have an executive or bus, I don't know exactly what to call the transport, but it'll be a really nice, call it bus, with Wi-Fi, with water, snacks, etc. We'll go out from San Francisco to Sonoma. We'll leave at about 10 o'clock, get there at 11:30, and then we'll be back in downtown San Francisco at 6. So we'll have lunch, we'll have some wine tasting, and plenty of time to network with existing and potential partners. So if that sounds interesting, check it out, events.thefreetoaster.com. And if you have any questions around any of the stuff I talked about today, feel free to reach out to me directly. Happy to answer specific questions you might have about what it takes to get onboarded on one of these big platforms. You can reach me at carlos@newmarketgrowth.com. So that'll wrap up today's pod. Thanks for tuning in, and I hope to see you all here soon.